If you like this channel, please subscribe, and if you enjoy the video, please give a thumbs up. If you dislike it, give a thumbs down. Hi folks, Dave with DBSTECHTALK, and today we are going to talk about the Beyerdynamic DT 17.7X Go. I want to thank inToit Reviews for sending these over for review. I do greatly appreciate it. inToit Reviews, you're awesome and you rock. The DT 17.7X Go from Beyerdynamic is a collaboration along with Massdrop, and it is a variant on the DT 1770. All my experience in the past with Beyerdynamic has been fairly limited. I did have a Beyerdynamic custom studio back in the day for about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was an okay headphone, but it did suffer from that Beyerdynamic Treble, and it did have a unique feature with the bass flex ports that you could open or close and change the sound, which was kind of neat, but that treble just was very fatiguing. The other experiences I've had with Beyerdynamic have mostly been at audio shows, and it's always been kind of meh or ouch, that treble. And usually I enjoy the bass and the mids, but the treble is usually the troublesome point for me. So how does the Beyerdynamic DT 17.7X Go fare? Well, when you get the box, now I didn't get the original box from inToit, but based off of pictures, it's going to be a pretty standard box. You're going to get a couple accessories. You're going to get a cable that is not really the greatest. It's going to curl up and coil up. It comes coiled like this, and it'll stay like that even when you unwind it. It's just not the greatest. It does have a screw down 3.5 with a 1/4 inch adapter, which is nice, so that if you're going to use this portable, you have a nice step down, so it'll fit on any of your phone cases or DAP cases, and then you get that 4-pin connector. It's an okay cable, but it's just rubbery and coiled up, and meh. Thankfully, inToit sent a replacement cable from Heart Audio, and it has this really nice connector and a 2.5 millimeter balanced connector. So I was able to run these off of a balanced amplifier, and I also used this little device, which is from Massdrop. Also, Mr. Olenod sent this to me, and it is a 4-pin XLR to 2.5 millimeter, so that I can connect a cable like the one that inToit sent over, and I use it with any of the amplifiers that have an XLR out. You also get an extra set of pads. You get the leather pad, and they feel like Daconis, and they're very nice. I actually really enjoy these pads quite a bit, but they do change the sonics of the headphone. The headphones themselves will have the velour pad on, and it's pretty much like a standard Beyerdynamic velour pad, and I truly love that pad, and I think it's one of the most comfortable pads available, especially of velour variants, no matter who the manufacturer is. So the headphones themselves, you get your standard black look from Beyerdynamic, big old headband, and it says Beyerdynamic on it. Plenty of padding, do not have any issues on top of the head. You get little plastic connectors here where your yokes slide in. It extends fairly decently, but I do find that I have to go about halfway up on the yokes in order to get to fit to my head. Yokes are metal, cups are plastic. You have a little bit of branding. It says DT 17.7X Go, made in Germany, on both sides, and does not really rotate or swivel, but you do get a little bit of wobble, which is nice. It'll pretty much fit anybody's head. And one concern for me with all Beyerdynamics is that cable that hangs down. You could potentially pull on it and disconnect or rip it out, so just do be careful on that. Comfort wise, they're okay for me. I do have a little bit of clamp force issues, about an hour into a listening session, and it'll really start to show through, especially on the lower part headed towards the jaw. Also, on the inside of the cup here, that little foam dampening that goes on the driver assembly can touch your ear, and it can be a little abrasive. I don't feel it with the leather one, as it has a little bit of a screen, but I kind of wish that the velours had some sort of little protection. It's not the worst feeling in the world, but I just kind of wish they had done something different. Speaking of the driver, it is a 45mm Tesla neodymium. So it's a fairly decent sized driver in there. And they also have a 32 ohms of impedance and a frequency response of 5 hertz to 40 kilohertz. They weigh about 14.6 ounces or 414 grams. They're fairly light. They do have just about the right amount of heft to them to feel durable, but not to be super annoying on the head. Comfort wise, as I said, is okay. Build wise is okay. I don't think that these are going to break anytime soon. And yeah, pretty standard German built Beyerdynamic. How do they sound? Well, they're different than any other Beyerdynamic, and it's got a uniqueness to it. And I will say that they are the best sounding and my most preferred Beyerdynamic that I've heard for a more extended period of time. With that being said, the bass. The bass has a slight mid-bass hump on it. It's more noticeable when you use the leather pad. The bass has decent detail retrieval. It is not the most detailed that I've heard, but you're not going to be missing much. And it does a fairly decent job of resolving in the bass. When you have the leather pad on, it does thicken up a little bit and become a little warmer, and you will lose a little bit more of the details. I find that the details come out better with the velour pad, even though you don't have as much impact and as much thump. So if you're looking for more of the fun factor in the bass, I would use the leather pad. The warmth does carry over a little bit into the mids, which is a nice thing. It gives them a little bit of fullness and a little bit of texture, and both pads do a good job with the mids sounding, vocals sounding natural and sounding well pleasing to the ears. The problem is when they start to get towards the treble, so that upper mids region, you get some graininess in there, and they can sound a little bit harsh and a little shouty, especially with the leather pad on some tracks. Now, it's not prominent on everything, and some amplifiers actually fix it also. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But for the most part, the mids are pretty clean. But I also find that they have a slight metallic timbre to them. There's just a touch of it. It's not as extreme as it can be on full cal, but they just have a little bit of a metallic sound and don't sound natural at all times. Some tracks you won't notice it, but more on like acoustical music, you will notice it just a little bit here and there. The treble is Beyerdynamic. You gotta talk about the treble. And once you start to climb and you get 8K, 10K, the velour pad does a better job of controlling it. It's smoother, and it has a more natural tone to it. Whereas with the leather pad, they become a little shouty and a little sibilant. And it's like you have two cars. You have a center line and or a dotted center line, and the one on the right is the velour pad, and he's staying on his path, and he's doing exactly what he should be doing as far as being in control. And the leather pad is always inching towards that center line and crowding the other car. And he never really crosses over into the other lane, but he's borderline of getting, I'm going to shred your ears off. I'm going to let you know that that I'm here. And I just find that the velours have a more natural tone to them and are smoother. You get about the same detail and resolution between the two, but the velours are just more comfy. And then also, as far as like airiness and just being a little more open sounding, the velours will sound a little more open and a little bit more just, they don't have that tinny metallic timbre that is present in the mids. That's also somewhat present in the treble with the leather pad. Going to the soundstage is nice and wide. For a closeback, you get nice spacing within the soundstage. It's not going to be open like a big, huge open headphone, but it's a larger than average soundstage. And where these really excel is accuracy and precision within the soundstage. I find that they're extremely pinpoint. You can really hone in on where the details are. Now, it's pretty much a straight across stage. It's not curved, and you don't get a lot of like width and depth in the layering, but what you do get is the spacing in between. So, you know, if there's a bunch of things in the stage, you'll be able to tell where each one is. It doesn't block it out or anything. And it does a good job of isolating and separating out the instruments and vocalists. And so you can really tell exactly where each one is. And that's for both headphones or pads. But I find that the velour, again, has a little bit more airiness, a little more openness feeling than the leathers. The leathers are a little bit more, make things sound a little more thick and a little bit more enjoyable and lush, but it's not actually as more neutral and accurate as the velours. So the DT177X Go, with the word Go, you would think it would play well with portable devices. Kind of. I'm not exactly sure what the sensitivity is on these. I couldn't find it anywhere online that I looked. I do know that they have 32 ohms of impedance, so they're fairly easy to drive, but I found that they do benefit from an amplifier. So if you're going to use it with a DAP or your phone, I would recommend taking a portable amplifier along, and just kind of give it a little extra boost. Unless you have a pretty powerful DAP, which I really don't have, then I would recommend something along those lines. It's doable for portable. I really didn't use it that way, though. I used it more for desktop. Find that on the desktop, it plays better with everything when you have the velour pads on. If you have the leather pad on, it's a little more amp dependent. I find that if you use it with the leather pads on the THX amplifiers, the 788 or the 789, the details and clarity and resolution that those amps provide was just too much, and those pads wanted to shred the ears. Now the bass was really nice and thumpy and stuff, but it just didn't sound natural, and that metallic timbre really came through on the THX. Not so much with the velours. I found that the velours smoothed that out a little bit and tamed that peak a little bit, and it actually sounded really nicely on the 789 and 788 with the velour pad. Moving on to the LCX and the CTH, and using the Grace Design SDAC balanced as the DAC, also the SMSO SU8 and the Geshelli Labs Enoch 2 Pro. All three DACs sounded wonderful on it. All three are very similar in sound signatures, and I found that amplifiers played best with the velours. It adds just a warmth to it and tames the treble peaks just a little bit, but thickens up the bass just enough, and it just had a very lush feeling. Sounded good with the leather pads. Let's flip those around so you don't have to look at the back screen. It sounded good with the leather pads, but it was a little bit thicker and fun. It was an enjoyable sound. And so the DT177X Go, it's the best sounding Beyerdynamic that I've heard. It has the best treble control and the overall just a smoother sound to it, but it still reminds you that it's a Beyer, and that's the problem for me. It's still too much. Do I recommend the Beyerdynamic DT177X Go? Yes. I recommend it for anybody who wants to have the ability to swap pads and change the sound signature of a headphone. With the leathers, you get a little warmer, thicker, fun bass and warmer mids with excitement in the treble. And with the velours, you get more balanced and neutral sound and more control throughout, and a little more open airiness sound signature. So you basically can get a 2-in-1 with the Beyerdynamic DT177X. Problem is, it's not a close back for me. I recommend it to everybody else but myself. It has too much of the Beyer sound signature for me, and that treble is still present, and it just hits me in the wrong spot. But it's a good can, and I recommend it, and I respect it, but not enough to purchase one. inToit reviews, I do greatly appreciate you sending over the Beyerdynamic DT177X Goes, and I have really enjoyed the time with them. Check out the link down below for his channel, and give him a thumbs up and say hello and thank him for sending these over for me to review, and give him a subscription if you would like. This has been Dave with DBS Tech Talk. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen is going to be a subscription link and a notification bell. If you haven't already, please check those off, and then check out the links down below for Patreon, PayPal, Discord, and playlists on Deezer and Tidal that were used. Also links to the products that were mentioned. Thanks. Have yourself a great day.